Recursion is where we can solve problems by solving smaller versions of the same problem. We do this by writing really simple functions that call themselves. In this video, you'll learn exactly how recursion works step by step. We'll explain some of the pitfalls, how to get around some of them, such as with memoization, and we'll talk about when and when you wouldn't use it. Let's get right into it. Here we have a really simple example that calculates any particular sequence of Fibonacci. For those of you who don't know, Fibonacci occurs in nature all over the place, and you calculate it by summing the two numbers that came before it in the sequence. All we need to know to write the recursive function is what's the formula for calculating Fibonacci, and where does the sequence start. Where the sequence starts and where recursion ends is known as the base case. Every recursive function must have a base case in order to know when to stop. Otherwise, it will recurse forever or until you get a stack overflow. Fibonacci starts at 0 or 1. This code calculates assuming the start is at 1. So for our stop, we say if n is less than 2, just return the value of n. Otherwise, we say we don't know what the values that came before are, so let's call Fibonacci again to work out the number below. This effectively solves the equation top down, and with the aid of my great, who am I trying to kid, woeful graphic skills, we can see exactly what happens. First of all, our function is called with a value of 5. The left-hand side of the sum calls n minus 1, which calls the function again with the value of 4. This in turn calls the function again with the value of 3, which calls again with the value of 2, and again with the value of 1. 1 knows the answer is 1, so bubbles 1 straight back up. The function above it then calls the second half of the equation with minus 2, which equates to f0, which returns 0. 1 plus 0 is 1, which is then returned to the f3 function, which then calls f1, which also returns 1, which sums to 2. The function f4 now knows that the first part of the equation is 2, so calls n minus 2, which is 2, which then calls f1 and f0. As we know, this equates to 1, so it's 2 plus 1, which is 3. This returns all the way up to the first calling function, which then calls the second branch of the tree all the way down to the bottom and back up to the top to get the answer of 5. So basically each function goes, I don't know what the answer is, I'm going to ask my lower version, which does until we hit the base case, which then flows all the way back up the tree. Looking at this tree, we can see straight away that there's some issue with this kind of recursion. Multiple functions are called with the same value multiple times. Fibonacci with a value of 1 is called 5 times. This gets worse and worse as the number gets higher, which makes the tree much deeper. The second issue is in most languages, calling functions uses the stack, which is a finite resource and can cause to stack overflows. But more on that after we talk about how we fix the first issue with something called memoization. This is a term coined by someone called Donald Michi, a codebreaker at Bletchley, and it's basically a synonym for the word caching. So once a function's been called once with a particular parameter, the return value is cached and can be returned instead of recomputing. For the language I'm using here for the examples, which is Python, we can use functools, LRU cache, to actually cache function values for us. To do this, we just do from functools import LRU cache. This stands for less recently used, and then we decorate our Fibonacci function with @LRU_cache, and this will automatically cache the values for us and push them back in when it's time. If you're following along at home, you can try running Fibonacci with a value of 50, it'll take a long time. Now add the LRU cache decorator and it will be almost instant. If you're not using a language that makes things super simple for you, you can implement this yourself by just creating an array to store the values, and then referencing them by the number that was passed in. So here I have a global list storing 0 and 1 called lfib, and then if the number is less than the length of lfib, I'll return the number from lfib. Otherwise, I'll run the Fibonacci equation and then store the return value of the sum to lfib. This will actually run much faster than the LRU cache version because LRU cache has overhead. And the important thing is the function is still super simple and easy to read. And if you thought Stack Overflow was just the name of a famous website that you go to solve your problems, it isn't. The stack in programming, or sometimes referred to as the call stack, is a fixed size memory structure that your program gets whenever it starts running. By default, Windows compilers give you a 1 megabyte stack, and Linux compilers give you typically a 16 megabyte stack. The 16 megabyte stack is much better for deep recursion than the 1 megabyte stack. We'll explain why in just a moment. This memory is a LIFO data structure, meaning last in, first out. Each time a function starts to run in your code, a stack frame is created, the first one typically representing main. Stack frames contain a number of data points, like the parameters used to call your function, any local variables created, the state of any CPU registers, and a return address. These data points will differ between programming languages. In the language I'm using here, Python, we actually have two completely different stacks at play. One is the one used by the Python interpreter, and the second is the one that runs our Python code. In this case, it always starts with __main___ frame. In our Fibonacci example, the first function that is called is Fibonacci, and we pass a value of 5. This in turn calls itself with a value of n-1, which is 4, and the stack now has 3 stack frames on it, the main one, and 2 for Fibonacci, one with a parameter of 5 and one with a parameter of 4. This in turn calls Fibonacci with a value of 3, which calls it with a value of 2, which calls it with a value of 1, and we reach our base case. If we had used Fibonacci 6 to start in my example with a tiny stack, we would have actually run out of memory trying to create the next frame, and the program would crash. Luckily, we had just enough memory to store the last frame, and now the stack starts to unwind. You see, Fibonacci with a value of 1 can return a value, and so does, and pops off the queue. The previous call starts running where it left off, calling n-2, which calls Fibonacci 0. This instantly returns a value and pops off the stack. Fibonacci 2 continues running where it left off again, and this time returns a value, popping off the stack itself. This behavior continues until we go all the way back to Fibonacci 5, which then starts the right-hand side branch of the tree. Once this branch has gone all the way down and then wound back up, Fibonacci 5 will get its value and will return to main. In reality, call stacks are much bigger than this, so you'll be able to do much more recursion. In Python, there's a soft limit of 1000 concurrent recursions. This can be increased using a method call in sys. And remember, this isn't the total number of recursions, this is the number of functions deep you have to go to reach the bottom of your tree in whichever case. So this actually gives you a ton of wiggle room. Now let's move on to when you would and wouldn't use recursion. I actually wouldn't use recursion to solve Fibonacci. There's a lot of overhead in creating all those stacked frames. I could get far better performance by actually just doing this in a loop and starting to solve the problem bottom up. Here's an iterative approach that would solve the problem. If you want some time to review this, then please pause the video now. Next, I'm going to walk you through a real-life use case that I would use recursion for. But first, a shameless plug. If this video has helped you understand recursion, then please leave a like, and if you've watched several of my videos and like them, why not subscribe? You can ask any questions you may have in the comments below. Okay, so let's get to a case where we would use recursion. Here I have a Python dictionary that represents some JSON that got passed in and I converted. You can see that this dictionary contains other dictionaries and it goes to multiple levels. If this was a fixed message, I would definitely parse it normally. If it isn't, however, I would write some recursive code like this. Here we have a function called dparse. We pass in the data from a dictionary and a key. If the data passed in is not a dictionary, then we don't have to recurse any further, so I'll just return a tuple containing the key and the data. If, however, the data is a dictionary, then we will loop through each key in that dictionary and we will build up a path based on the key passed in to the function and the key that we're searching in the dictionary, and we will then pass all that to dparse with the data and the key. This will then get appended to items, and when we finish, we'll return items. And when we run this over the message, you will see that we get a path such as message/sum, and the value is 1. The reason to use this code here is it's really difficult to know how deep you need to go, and writing the code for that could be quite complicated. This takes out all of the complication. It can be adapted to read any kind of variable size tree, and so could be used for things like B-tree index searches and all kinds of really useful stuff that would otherwise be hard to write. I hope this video has helped you master recursion. Top left, you can check out how to use regular expressions. And with that, thanks for watching, catch you next time.